Hello everyone, and welcome to the Future of Dogs podcast, a place for the whole dog world to come together and ask the big why and what if questions that will shape the dogs of the future. Join me, Hannah Malloy, as we chat to some of the world's most groundbreaking professionals intent on enriching and evolving the future of dogs. This podcast is in association with Animal Behaviour, my online learning video library for dog owners and dog geeks. Big thanks to my dog's favourite food and our Season 1 sponsor, Nature's Menu. With over 40 years in the pet food business, Nature's Menu is Europe's leading expert in raw and natural pet food. So let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the Future of Dogs. In this episode, The Future of Dog Conversations, we're going to lay some crucial conversational foundations that will help us all to navigate some of the trickier topics and discussions we're going to touch on in each episode. And who better to help us learn how to have these difficult conversations than a venerated veteran in the field of psychology and cultural change. It's my absolute honour to introduce you to Dr. Henry Cloud. Dr. Cloud is a clinical psychologist, a pastor to pastors, and New York Times best-selling author. His 45 books, including Iconic Boundaries, have sold over 20 million copies worldwide. Throughout his storied career as a clinician, he started treatment centres, created breakthrough new models rooted in research, and has been a leading voice on issues of mental health and leadership on a global scale. Dr. Cloud lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Tori, and their two daughters, Olivia and Lucy. Dr. Cloud, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so good to be with you. I was so excited when you called, because you called me as a psychologist, but as I was telling you a moment ago, if I weren't a psychologist, I would be a dog trainer. It's my favorite thing in the world.
That's amazing. What is it that you love about dog training?
Well, so many things. First of all, I just love dogs. I mean, there's no greater creature on the planet, specifically a few breeds. I have my favorites, but I love the relationship, and I think the essence of dog training and dog ownership, no matter what the purpose of the dog, if it's a work dog or a family pet, is the quality and nature and the ingredients of the relationship, because that's what it's all about. And also, I love to see a dog fulfill its purpose. Different breeds are bred to do different things. I was just pheasant hunting last week, and we had the most amazing retrievers. And to watch those guys work and be happy in their work is it's the coolest thing ever. And I love the design of how dogs are designed for relationship and for work, just as humans are.
They're just the most incredible species. And I think, we have...
What's your favorite breed?
Oh my goodness. I don't think I have a favorite breed. I own a Cocker Spaniel, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite breed of dog necessarily. I think different dogs fit into different contexts so beautifully. But yeah, to train, I like working with gun dogs because they're quicker to train in my experience than many others.
Did you say working dogs?
Yeah, gun dogs specifically. I know in different areas of the world we group dogs differently, but dogs who work predominantly on the field, so Labradors and Spaniels, and I just love that boundless energy and just how much they love working with us. They're biddable. But yeah,
they love having a job. If you don't give them a job, they're going to find one, and it might be digging up your yard. So you better give them a better job.
100%. And we gave them those jobs. We totally shaped their evolution, and I think we really have a responsibility to design the future of dogs, which is why we called this podcast The Future of Dogs. I believe that we can really choose and shape the future just as we've shaped their past. And so we're going to ask some of the more difficult questions that people tend to get a little bit tense around. So, I mean, to be honest with you, Dr. Cloud, I'm a huge fan of your books. They have challenged and changed the way that I relate to people, and I regularly go on a character development deep dive after I've read some of your material. But I've also been a regular listener to the Dr. Cloud show, and I think your passion for people and behaviour change is just really tangible in that audio format. So I wonder if you can start us off by telling us a little bit more about your personal mission in the field of behaviour, and what it is that motivates you on the more difficult days.
Well, I mean, I went into this field as a patient, actually. I was in college and I got really depressed, and my life fell apart. I'd gone to college to play a sport, and I got injured and kind of lost my life dream, and I got really depressed, and so I was trying to study how to get undepressed, right? And I just fell in love with the whole psychology of how we're wired and how we get better. But also, for me, there's a deep spiritual component of that and a faith component. So I went into the field as a clinician. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and then a few years into it, I started a chain of treatment centers. And I was a clinical director for a long time over that company, and we had hospitals and treatment centers in about 40 markets in the Western United States, and did a lot of research in that, developed a lot of content, started writing books, and early on I got into the field of leadership and working with high performers, and so I've had a kind of a two-pronged career as a clinician, but also as a leadership and high performance doctor, if you will. And what motivates me is that I just know, I don't believe, I know that wherever somebody is, we can get from here to there if we get in line with the laws that govern how we get better. And I love that hope that when somebody can be feeling hopeless or stuck, as dog owners can, that they find out, oh, there's hope. We can do something about this. And so that, and for me, I know all your listeners and viewers, don't come from a faith perspective that I come from, but we all see the world in some way. And for me, it's deeply, because I believe the universe was designed by a God that had order and laws to it. And when we discover it's like learning the laws of physics. I mean, this is the way it's designed. And when we discover how things work and align with them, to me, it's a deeply spiritual enterprise as well. Mm-hmm. And it's all about relationship, ultimately.
That's it. And when you see, obviously, you have a lot of different routes that you go down to help people discover and root out their dysfunction and heal that. When it comes to the area of people disagreeing with each other, which is
what? Who can disagree about dogs? I mean, we all love our dogs. I tell you what, I have gotten into some of the most difficult conversations. Uh-huh. I mean, and I'm a psychologist. I deal with gnarly situations, but you get people talking about their dogs. It's like parenting. I mean, you can get some really, really difficult conversations, even among families or friends or spouses, about how you train your dog and what you don't do and what you do, and it gets difficult.
And I think that's really what we'd love to just unpick a bit more and see if we can give our listeners some navigation tools really for having difficult conversations. I have to say, I caveat, I never train friends and family. I will outsource that. There is a level of relationship.
You never train what?
Friends or family's dogs. It's a no-go area for me. When you have like a really close relationship with somebody and then you want to work with their dog, it can get really sticky. So I tend to encourage other trainers.
It's just like a psychologist. We wouldn't treat friends or family anyway. But you know what? Since I'm not a dog trainer, mm-hmm. I love going into friends' homes with an out-of-control dog, and they're like, can't stop him from jumping up. I'm so sorry. I can't get him off the couch or whatever. And I go, if you want me to tell you how to fix that, I can. And it's, dogs can quickly change. So anyway, I do it as a layperson. I'm not a professional like you, but.
I mean, to be honest with you, some of the areas that we're going to touch on across this series are looking at changing the way that we talk about big topics. So each of our experts is going to be invited to just comment on the past and present and the potential future of their particular field. So, and what I see when I look at the dog world, the areas that I think people struggle with a lot are there's a lot of isolation within professional industries that work with dogs. There's a lot of overworking. There's a lot of comparison, and a sort of huge focus on what divides us rather than unites professionals within the industry, within each industry.
Yeah.
And so people don't talk to each other. And then when they do talk to each other, social media kicks in, and we tend to get into sort of and shame culture, and so we would love to have some foundational principles that just help us to navigate conversing about such an emotive topic, isn't it? People really become attached to their belief systems when it comes to their job, or maybe a breed that they breed, or whether it's a rescue center versus should you breed, should you rescue, huge topics. So tell us a little bit more about what the past and the present look like for you in regards to boundaries and confrontations, and teaching it, and what it was like, and what you hope it could look like in the future for people who are discussing this emotive stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I do believe that there are some universal principles, and what happens is, I think a lot of times people either get divided, they get polarized on one principle that's antagonistic to the other. And I'll talk about that in a second. But that is at the source of so many of these conflicts. And I think it's really helpful when you can get above the discussion to the principles that ultimately we're both going to agree on. And then people get hung up in the tactics. They get hung up in the particular answer for them about that principle. And a lot of times, if we can unite on the principles, then we can find tactics that meet the need, that are more acceptable to each other. Mm-hmm. But let me just start with this, and then we'll go into the difficult conversations specifically. But probably, and this is wrong, but I'm going to say it like it's true, because it's true. I think one of the basic big divides in the universe is the divide between love and limits. That I think that we were created and designed for love and limits to go together. Okay? In every relationship, when you love someone, you also have to have expectations for behavior. And in other words, if somebody loves without any limits, then they are what we call an enabler or codependent. And some people are all love and no limits. Other people fall down on the limit side, and you got to get that kid to do their homework. They're never going to amount to anything. Well, but they've got a neurological problem. Well, it doesn't matter. You got to, and they're all responsibility and all limits. And when we have limits without love, then we have angry limits. And we have controlling limits, and we have harsh limits, and we have punitive limits. When we have love without expectations or limits, we have chaos. And you get in a lot of these conversations, and what you see people really arguing about is their own internal conflict with the polarity that's difficult for them. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's codependent, you're going to see the dog having control of the house, and if somebody's really harsh and limiting, they're going to be maybe mean and correction, or never let them get out of the kennel, or you let the dog run the house. It's a dog, not a human. And you hear all that kind of stuff, and so I think that if we can all agree on life involves love and expectations for behavior, and there's some things that are not okay and we can't allow. I really want my dog pooping outside, not inside. Okay, so can we agree that some limits are important? So, and the opposite. So I think that's one of the big universals in this space, as it is in parenting or anything else. But the other one, I think, is the primacy of relationship, and that all of life works through relationship. And when people get in these conversations, if they can center around what's most important here is our relationship, it's not our disagreements. Mm-hmm. and we can find a way to disagree with the relationship and the love we have for each other as the highest value, then we can probably find some answers that satisfy, each of our needs. And the way I would start specifically about difficult conversations is I love the definition that the Harvard researchers came up with a number of years ago, that you are in a difficult conversation when three components are there. Number one, you're talking about something where the stakes are high. And when you get into dog training, the stakes are high. How are we going to live with our pet? What's the role of this dog in our house? How much of time and energy and space and behavior and all this? Because if having a dog is like having a kid, you have a member of the family that's going to affect stuff, right? So the stakes are high. It gets into money, it gets into time, it gets into whether or not you respect the person that you're living with on what they do and how they treat the dog. Secondly, after the stakes are high, there's high emotions. We have strong feelings about what we're talking about. If you and I were discussing, do you care what kind of coffee cup I have in this interview? Nah, probably not. But there's other things you would have strong emotions about that I would, be saying or doing. So there's got to be strong emotions that make it difficult. And then the third thing is we have different perspectives. So you got the stakes are high, the emotions are high, and we think very differently about this topic. That's when you have a difficult conversation.
And I think this is just so true that, dogs not only have a huge impact on the inner house, but they have a wider impact on the community. When I first started studying animal behavior, I actually wanted to be a dolphin trainer. That's what I was going to go into to start with. And then
you wanted to be a what?
A dolphin trainer. I was going to work with, with sea life. That was my heart. And
oh my gosh, when I used to go watch the dolphin shows, I would cry. Like my kids would be laughing at me. It's the most beautiful relationship they have with the trainers. It's incredible.
It is. But then I think I came out of uni and realized that I think there was a Blackfish documentary that came out. It all got a bit dark in that world. And actually the phrase that comes to mind is I said, I'm not going to change the world there. And I think that's always been my modus operandi, is to do something that has great impact. And then I came across this charity, Medical Detection Dogs, that proved that dogs could smell cancer. And I suddenly had this picture of time, and I saw humans and dogs walking together for 20,000 years in this amazing little animal that had not only got the physical kit to be able to smell our biochemistry, but that they were competent enough to come up to us and be like, excuse me, I think you have a problem and I think you don't know about it, and I'm going to keep telling you until you notice. And then the humans were just, sensitive enough to their dogs to say, I think my dog is trying to tell me something, So just that incredible research totally switched my focus towards dogs. And when I looked at the wider world of the dog world, why do people train a certain way? Why do people breed that breed? Why do we show? And my 5-year-old brain in a 23-year-old's body just started on the why train, and collected a bunch of questions that I think we could much more innocently ask in this generation, because I came out of uni and said, well, what's the conservation strategy here for dogs? What are we doing? What are we trying to change? What are we trying to create? Because without some guidelines, as you say, without some limits on our behavior, I think what can happen is we end up in a behavioral snowball. And now there is a bunch of mess. The UK is seeing dog bites tripling in the last 20 years. We've seen...
Really?
Yeah, and 9 people have been killed by dogs this year, which is an unprecedented amount of death. And so there's fallout, there's real big, on a much broader community scale, fallout that requires us to start having these difficult and emotive conversations. What breeds should we be breeding? Is there a limit that we might put on saying this dog is not physically comfortable in its body? Maybe we should cross it with another breed. So yeah, this is the stuff that we really want to get into. And ultimately, the dog world is full of people that care for animals deeply, and they're working to fix a pain point that they can experience, but they're not famously great with changing human behavior. So yeah, many professionals in the vet world, unfortunately in the UK, vets have one of the highest suicide rates of any professional industry. There's a serious mental health issue there. And for many people in grooming and rescue, there's just such passion to change things. But I think they get compassion fatigue for the dog owners. So what advice would you give to those?
And I think also, if I can interject this, and you may agree or disagree, but I think that it's the same thing you see sometimes in the helping professions, that a lot of times people are attracted to helping and compassion kinds of professions because that's one of their signature strengths. They're deeply compassionate people. But a lot of times they themselves have also been wounded, and they haven't adequately been afforded the opportunities to heal. And then they get into situations with, wounded dogs that need rescue, it could be any, and there's such identification with the pain that it just goes into even deeper despair. And I think it goes to, when you talk about the psychology of dog training and difficult conversations, one of my strongest principles in life, I believe, is that we have to, a surgeon goes into the operating room, but what does the surgeon do first? They scrub. So they're not infecting the process with our own germs. And sometimes if we haven't looked at our own psychology about how we view the world, our own defenses, what we're afraid of or what we're not afraid of, and our own voices inside of our head, that kind of becomes our dog training. And then we bump up against somebody else and we have conflicts because we really haven't kind of looked inside first and knowing, what's getting triggered in me about this person or, the situation. So I think that's a big principle as well. It's like a psychologist. We always, in training, we have to go through our own therapy first so we can see the other person clearly and not get our own issues, wrapped up in it.
That's so good. So good. And, I think that's something that definitely needs doing. And the dog field, there's very little mental health support, I think, for professionals. And dog trainers are behavioral therapists often, and they don't have, sort of strict guidelines for making sure that they get, say, supervision. So if you could give someone advice about how to, if someone's listening right now and they're like, oh my gosh, Dr. Cloud, that is me. Like, I haven't done my homework. I haven't done my heart work to prepare for the complexity of my industry. What would you suggest the first steps might be for them to be able to sort of shore up their emotional resources and do their job better?
So as a dog trainer?
As a dog trainer, a vet, a rescue centre owner, a groomer, the whole world of dogs, or a dog owner, actually, stepping into that field.
Not trying to get over spiritual in this. It just, I'm going to quote a verse to you. But the principle, whether somebody's a person of faith or not, the principle applies. There's a verse in the New Testament where it says, we comfort others with the comfort that we have received from God. Okay, so it's sort of like you're on an airplane, the decompression, the mask will fall, put the mask on your face first, and then you can turn and help the child, next to you. And so I think it's incumbent on all humans. I think, hurt people, right? And so I think all humans, we need to be getting healthy ourselves and having our own woundedness or trauma or goofy thinking or whatever cleared up before we can really adequately help anyone. So I think whether it's dog training or electrician, that every human needs to be on their own growth path and becoming the most loving and pure-hearted and hardworking and compassionate and fun and intellectually curious person that you can become. And you're going to be a better whatever you are. And so whatever you do, you're going to bring, the research on leadership in business um, showed that 90% of somebody's success does not have to do with IQ and competency and training and all that. It has to do with their emotional intelligence, which is awareness of self, awareness of others, and be able to adequately show up in the conversation, in a way that's helpful and not destructive. So that's good for all of us.
Really, really good. It's really good. And so if we were to start to look at some pointers, say, for example, I start a show and I'm going to get a breeder on who wants to totally change the design of the Doberman. Oh my goodness, that's a tough topic for you.
Do not mess with my Dobies.
Right? And so they go, no, actually, the thing is, Dr. Cloud, is that Dobermans actually require a longer nose or different colours. Or there's
become an artist and paint one.
What is likely to happen is that we're going to get some fallout in the social media arena. I can see it. I have already preconceived this idea is likely to happen. And so it would be really great if you can give us sort of, 3 to 5 tips that will help us all to navigate difficult conversations from that place of love and of limits. Like, how do you know, what do you think would be an appropriate limit for having some of these highly emotive conversations? And how do we circumnavigate back to love when it all starts to get a little bit messy?
Well, I think the first thing is, look at it this way. The old, if you've ever been trained in marksmanship or hunting or something like that, if you have a firearm, they teach you ready, aim, fire, right? Well, ready is number one for a difficult conversation. You've got to get ready to have the conversation. And what that means is we got to examine, what am I afraid of here? Because I'm going to react if I feel fear. Am I afraid of losing something? Am I afraid of hurting somebody by speaking the truth? Am I afraid they're going to reject me if I show up with my real opinion? Is it going to damage our relationship? And so we've got to get in touch with our own fears first and kind of deal with those. And that sometimes means we need to have a difficult conversation before we have the difficult conversation with somebody else. It helps me. Do I sound normal here? Am I getting too amped up? And so kind of, deal with our fears. And then I think we've got to really kind of get clear about what is it that's really important to me in this conversation. And what I want to make sure I get across and sort of know where you stand first, but I do it in pencil and not ink, because the goal a lot of times of a good conversation is I actually get changed. I can learn, and that gets us into the mindset. So the first mindset that we have to enter into is one of creating psychological safety for the conversation. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is you're there, okay? I'm over here. We have different perspectives. We've already known that, going into this. But in between us, we need to create a safe space for our truth, our perspective, and what it means to us to be put out on the table, and they can put theirs out there and have a safe space with a psychological bubble of safety around it. So it's safe for me to get my feelings out there. That means non-reactivity, non-judgment, non-denial, non-gaslighting, all that kind of stuff. And that's why you've got to enter the conversation with an accepting spirit of curiosity. My first role in the conversation is to try to hear you and not only understand you, but have you understand that I understand. So when I'm saying, so you're saying, well, you really don't feel like a dog should ever be allowed on the bed, right? Well, what if I do? What if I love my dog on the bed, right? I'm going to put that aside, And I'm going to try to help you understand that I really understand and I'm curious. I want to know, I really want to get at why this is so important to you. And so I start with safe listening. But I got to make them understand that I understand. So I get it. You're saying that you really feel like it's not sanitary, like you could catch a disease. That's scary. I mean, I get it. And and once you start to understand someone, you'll see their whole system begin to relax into the safety. Now, we haven't agreed on anything yet, but you're safe with me to give me your perspective. So we have to avoid, in our understanding, we have to avoid invalid. Well, that's not true because we have to avoid that. We have to avoid judgment. We have to avoid criticism. We have to avoid being defensive. And we've really got to avoid also unplugging. Oh, you got to be kidding me. So where we unplug from the discourse, body language, tone, and all that. And so I think that kind of presupposes that we've already bled off the emotions that we have about this, and we're going into this, kind of objectively and get clear. Sometimes it helps to go into a conversation with some notes, knowing, in talking about this, I was thinking before, and there's a few things. I'm going to refer to my notes because I recorded some of what's important to me and what I think and all that. So it's not bad because some people get flustered, and it's not bad to go in with some tools that you can refer to. And the other thing is to start the conversation by affirming what you would like at the end of the conversation. Now, if we can do that, the goal of this conversation, I'm not here to change you, and I'm here to hear you, but I would like for us to agree that we're going to have a conversation to really try to learn from each other, but above everything, to respect each other, and at the end of it, to be able to walk away, say, you know what, we might still disagree, but our connection, our relationship's what's the most important. So then we go into making a space, to listen first to understand. And once you understand, then you're getting to, a lot of times there's a need behind why they're holding that position. Like you don't want to catch a disease. Well, let's understand that, because ultimately what you're going to get down to is there may be another way to meet that need, even with the dog in the bed. Or, whatever the other, say somebody doesn't want the dog in the bed because, it wakes me up at night. Well, I don't want you to have a sleepless night, and so we can learn to meet each other's needs because we find the things, and here's a big one, find the things in the conversation that the other person has that you can be an advocate for. Oh my gosh, I agree. I don't want anybody to get sick, or I don't want anybody to have sleepless nights. And you begin to advocate for their position their need underneath, whatever their position is. So figure out what they want, hear that, be curious about it, learn from it, and then ask the question, so what would be an answer that would get us there? I've got this need, you've got that need. Help me get there. Let's find an answer. And then now we're sitting on the same side of the table and the problem's over there. Mm-hmm. We're not on opposite sides today. We're teammates trying to solve the problem of how do I feel close to my dog and not get ticks or something. Right? But we can solve these problems if we're on the same side of the table and we don't get divided. And then you've got to when you get in log jams, that becomes, the hardest one. One good tactic on that, I said to focus on their interests and their needs and not their positions, because then we can find an answer that meets us. But sometimes we can't. And if this has got to end up in some sort of policy decision, why don't we agree on an objective external standard that we'll both submit to? Okay? So you and I are going to, why don't we agree, excuse me, don't worry, you're not going to get COVID. I've had 18,000 tests in the past 7 days.
Actually, something I'm really worried
There are
about.
calls.
To be honest with you, we could have a difficult conversation about that.
What's that?
It's actually something I'm really worried about. So if we could have a difficult conversation about me not getting COVID via Zoom, that'd be really helpful. Bless you. So you were saying that sometimes we get into logjam.
So sometimes we can appeal to an objective standard. So why don't we each come together? Why don't we come together and let's pick 3 dog trainers that we both really respect. And let's go talk to them. And we'll agree to submit to kind of whatever the objective standard is. It's sort of like when you buy a house, the buyer and the seller will agree to an objective standard of outside appraisals. Sometimes that can get you out of the logjam. But one of the guiding principles is this: you'll never screw up too badly if you go soft on the person but firm on the issue. See, I can maintain a position and be immovable on that if I have to be, but I can still go soft on the person. And what happens is we'll go hard on the person and sometimes even get squishy on the issue or vice versa. So, and then there's some killers we have to avoid: defensiveness, invalidation, anger and contempt, judgmentalism, criticism, unplugging, things like that. Normally, that's kind of the big principles you see in a conversation.
And that's all we have time for this week. But this is part 1 of a 2-part conversation. So if you want to finish the story, make sure you like and subscribe to catch up with the rest of this conversation on the future of dogs.